Guys, in this video, we are going to be going over chapter 12, which is going to talk about Gregor Mendel and the experiments that he performed and heredity. So let's get started. The pea plant is going to be the model organism, the model system that Mendel was studying. So we have a lovely picture of the pea plant here, and his studies were awesome information at the time. Nobody paid attention to them. So at the time, he was a monk. Johann Gregor Mendel was a monk living in Czech Republic, and he was studying genetics. And so at his monastery, he was able to have access to the garden, and he was studying pea plants. And the theory of the day was called continuous variation. So with continuous variation, it's assuming that the two parents and their offspring, that offspring is a blend of them. So say if I had dark hair and my husband has light blonde hair and we had children, then our child had to be some blend, a mix. It wouldn't be dark hair and it wouldn't be light hair. It'd be somewhere in the middle. Um, that's continuous variation. So offspring, that's the theory of his time, was continuous variation, that offspring are some blend somewhere in between mom or dad, but not mom or dad, somewhere in the middle there. And he came through, and his theory was that it's not that way, that there are traits, and we are using discontinuous variation when we express those traits, those genes. So again, his model system was the pea plant. And with those, he was looking at traits, easily distinguishable traits. Are they, let's skip ahead, are the flowers purple or white? Are the flowers located near the base of the trunk, the axial, or are they at the terminal near the end? How tall is it? Is it taller? Is it short? Is it dwarf size? Are the seeds, are the peas themselves, are they round or do they have wrinkles on them? Are they yellow? Are they green? What's the pea pod look like? Is it inflated or is it constricted like Chinese peas in your stir fry? The pea pod color, are the peas green or are they yellow? So these are easily distinguishable traits. That's why the pea plant was a really great model organism, because it's a very simple trait controlled by just that one trait, controlled by these genes that we can play around with. So when he played around with them, he used this model system. And so we have P, and P is going to be the parent generation. So it didn't matter whether the violet flower was the male or the female, or the white flower was the male or the female. When we performed this reciprocal cross, we still got the same results. So if you use the pollen and it was coming from a purple plant, and you took that purple plant's pollen and you fertilized and put it on the stigma of the white plant, you're still going to get the same offspring as you would as if the male was a white flower and you took white flower pollen and put it onto a purple female flower part. You're still going to get the same stuff. So that's what reciprocal cross means. So we have P, and P stands for parent generation. So on the parent generation in this picture, we've got purple. We've got violet flowers on this one and white flowers on this one. And then we're going to cross those back and forth, take the male part on this plant. And that was another thing that was great about the pea plant. He could cut off the reproductive parts that he didn't want messed with, so it didn't accidentally self-pollinate or cross-pollinate. He can physically cut off the parts that he didn't want, so he had control over what pollinated what. So if we crossed a purple flower pea plant with a white flower pea plant, the first generation is the F1 generation. So the kids of those parents, the F1 generation. And in this case, if one parent was purple and one parent was white, all of the offspring were purple. Okay, so they're all purple. Let's see what happens if we take all of those first gen babies and we breed the first gen with another first gen. So we breed an F1 with an F1. What happens when we put those two together? And if we put F1 with F1 together, we end up with, oh goodness, I'm sorry. We end up with the F2 generation, which are basically the grandkids. And with the grandkids, we end up with this trait showing up again. We can see that there are purple flowers, just like we had in the F1 generation, but we also have white flowers showing up. So the white flower that was originally grandpa, parent generation from 2 generations ago showed back up again. So what does that tell us? That tells us that somehow that white trait was lurking in there, because that first generation F1s, they were all purple. But if we bred the F1s together and we ended up with F2 generation, white shows up again. What's up with that? We got to figure that out. So why is that happening? And then when he did this over and over and over again, we could crank out some numbers. And so we see that about 700 of those flowers are purple and about 200 of those flowers were white. So we'll talk about ratios. So here is our flower color: purple flowers, white flowers, and our ratio 700 and 224. So it's roughly, it's a little over 3, but we're just going to say it's a 3-to-1 ratio. So it's basically a 75-25 split in when we breed those guys together. Most likely 75% of the time it's going to be a purple flower as the offspring, but 25% of the time white shows up. And so we saw that over and over again with these different simple, easily distinguishable traits. A 3-1, still roughly a 3-1, 3-1, 3-1, 3-1, 3-1. So given that information, we're going to talk about some terminology, dominant and recessive, in the next section. The textbook goes over probability basics, some math involved. I'm not going to make you know this on the test. I'm going to focus on Punnett squares, but real briefly, I'm going to cover this part real briefly. There is the product rule and the sum rule. On the product rule, that's where you're looking for one event and another event. What is the probability that I'm going to, if I have a dice, the 6-sided die, 1 through 6, that I'm going to roll a number 2 and I'm going to flip a coin, and whatever I roll on dice does not affect flipping the coin, and whatever I flip on the coin does not affect rolling dice. These are totally different things happening at different times, and one does not affect the other. So what's the probability if I rolled a number 2 dice, and what's the probability if I flipped a coin and I got heads on that coin? So we've got this data that we did this 12 times. Here are all the 12 times that we rolled a dice, and out of the 12 times, 2 showed up 2 out of the 12 times. And if we want to reduce that fraction, 1 out of 6 times is where we're going to get whatever number we're looking for. We're looking for number 2. Flipping the penny, we flipped the penny 12 times, and it's a 50-50 shot, right? If we count up how many times we got heads, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 out of 12 times, we ended up with heads, or 50-50 shot, 1 out of 2. So let's plug those numbers in. If we are looking for the product rule, we are looking for one thing at the same time happens this other thing. So in that case, we're going to say if we wanted to roll a dice, that was the number 2. We did the math, and it was 2 out of 12 times, or 1 out of 6 times. And then we're going to multiply that, because again, it's the product, and products are when you're going to multiply stuff. We're going to multiply that by the probability of getting heads when we flip the penny. And that was a 1 out of 2. It was a 50-50 shot. So here's our probability for getting heads. On the product rule, we're going to multiply 1/6 fraction multiplied by the 1/2 fraction, and we end up with 1/12. So the probability of rolling a 2 when we roll one die and the probability of flipping a coin and getting it onto heads at the same time, rolling a 2 and getting a heads, it totals up to 1 out of 12. That's product rule. Sum rule is going to add things up together. But instead of adding things up together, we have two things happening in this example for the sum rule. We've got a penny and we've got a quarter. So we have two different coins. So what's the probability of one coin coming up as heads and another coin coming up as tails? So in this, it could be the penny that showed up as heads, or you could have the quarter as heads. And then the tails could be on the quarter, or the tails could be the penny. So we need to add all of that up. So we're going to put it together in this equation here. And we know flipping a coin is always, it's a 50-50, it's a 1.5. So this probability is 1/2 times this 1/2, which is going to give us 1/4. And then we're going to add that to the probability of the other chance happening. Well, we've got 1/2 and 1/2, and that's going to be 1/4. 1/2 times 1/2 is 1 times 1 is 1, 2 times 2 is 4, 1/4, and then we add them together. So 1/4 plus the 1/4 is going to bring us 2/4, which is going to equal, let's write that down, 2/4, which equal 1/2. That's the sum rule. There's the product rule. I'm not going to make you do this on the test, but I just wanted to explain it so you know what we're talking about. All right, so that's the first section. In the next section, we're going to talk about vocabulary and traits, and we're going to get into a whole lot of Punnett square material.